Welcome back, everyone. So this is a nice little mixed bag for my first dry aging test. I'd be taking this over to my friend's warehouse where he has a walk-in cooler, and this is going to be my first time dry aging. So we have a grouper, a snapper, and a yellow jack, and they are going to be the perfect test to see which ones work and don't. And this is going to be your introduction to dry aging the simple way, without any of the technicalities. I am working on a video which involves all the humidity level and temperature levels, fluctuations in a home fridge, and how that impacts the fish. Now, this is the fish once I got it back. It's been a week in his dry aging cooler, and you can see that they don't look bad. And later on, we're going to go into the smell test. So already first impressions are that the mass of the fish has decreased a lot. The eyes have remained glossy. The inside is still clean because that's the most important thing you want to do. So while this is going around, I'm also going to explain the basic process. You gut the fish and you take a toothbrush. There are special gun cleaning ones you can use, but you take a toothbrush in the guts, you can get out that bloodline that's exposed to the air. Scaling is optional, but once you do that, you're pretty much all set to dry age the fish in a controlled environment with 30 to 40 degrees temperature. And at the end of this, it actually did smell a bit smoky, from all the condensed oils of the fish. And if you don't remove that bloodline in the gut, it can actually make the fish bad, because that's going to create a bad smell and start rotting in a wrong way. The reason I say rot is because dry aging is kind of like a controlled rot. You don't let the bacteria build up and you don't let any of the bad things build up, but what you do is you slowly ferment and rot the meat in a sense without it actually spoiling, which breaks down the fibers and the muscle and all the parts of the meat, tenderizing it. It's the same thing that happens to steak when you dry age steak. So don't be afraid of this. So we would, I kept it in my home fridge for one day and just hung it up in a 30 to 40 degree walk-in cooler at my friend's warehouse for about 1 week. But already here, I'm starting to see that it's super gelatinous to cut into. This knife is still sharp. I use this knife to cut all my other fish that are fresh, and it's taking a lot more force, and that's partially due to the fact that the meat also condenses, and it changes in properties and texture. So usually I skip on snapper and grouper for sashimi. Maybe I'll use them for ceviche, but for sashimi I usually won't use snapper or grouper. They have a higher chance of having, those fibrous muscles, and the inner layers of each cut has those small tendons that connect the meat. Now, I wanted to find out how much that has changed since the 1 week of dry aging, and already you can start seeing that none of the fish actually look bad. This could be another opportunity for also how you can store fish rather than freezing it. I've seen some people in Hawaii, they will actually sun age the fish, kind of like sun dry age the fish, kind of like you would do with tomatoes. And I've really always wanted to try that, but I don't exactly have the right rig for that yet. I can build that one day though. Already you can see when I'm touching this meat, how when I lift it up on one side, it kind of stays up there like that. So I'd say once you dry age a fish like this one, like specifically the ones that are usually a bit of a more muscly and tendony fish like grouper or snapper, that it would actually be better to have your knife even sharper, even though my knife is sharp enough right here. The meat is incredibly firm, and it's lost a lot of the water weight that it originally has. So I actually should weigh a fish another time from now, before and after, and see exactly how much moisture is coming out. But what's being released during the dry aging process is a lot of the oils, but specifically a lot of the water weight, and that's coming out the meat and the tendons and the muscle is all tenderizing, and this is all happening simultaneously, which is why you want to control the temperature between about 30 to 40 degrees, and to also watch your humidity level. But I get into that later on in a different video that I'm going to be uploading within the next month. I will be showing charts about how all this impacts the fish, but the percentage of humidity also impacts how quickly the meat contracts. So if it contracts too quickly, what you end up with is undesired flavor sometimes, or you can even end up with too much drying rather than the aging portion. Like, you kind of want to simultaneously age it and dry it slowly together, not dry it super quickly and have it age like that. What I'm doing here is I'm just taking out the pin bones, pretty straightforward, especially in these smaller fish. You don't exactly want to bother with cutting out those pin bones. You'd be losing a good portion of the meat. But I can also tell that the pin bones are coming out without any meat like they usually would if you pull them in a different direction, and this has to do with how the meat's firmed up and how the pin bones have now kind of separated from the meat as well. And if you saw one of my other videos of kombujime, a similar process happens between the two. You have in kombujime a process of the salt from the seaweed and the lack of moisture in the seaweed absorbing some of that moisture from the fish, both drying out the fish and imparting seaweed flavor into it. This is almost the exact thing, which is why when you have a fish whole, there are layers protecting it from just completely oxidizing. You can do loins and such, but that involves a lot more intricate process with cleaning and with also maintaining the temperature with intricate controls. But for now, this is straightforward and it can lead you into doing it at home. But what I really wanted to get into is the analysis of how these fish taste after being dry aged, which ones I like and which ones I don't. That little container right there is where I take all the scraps from the bones to make a sushi roll later on with. One thing I did notice is that when the fish dry ages, the skin really does dry up. I mean, you can already see how it's already not curling up, and you can see very little moisture on there. What this means is that you now have the perfect skin for chicharron, which is what I've done several times in other videos, and it's something super easy that you can do to enjoy more of the fish and throw away less. You can still see that the meat is incredibly clean. So for this one, I wanted to do several tests. I wanted to do a basic sashimi test, I wanted to do a nigiri test, and I also wanted to do a little bit of carpaccio and some chicharron with the skin. Usually the prime cuts like this I would use for the sushi. Any of the oddball cuts I would either turn into a nigiri or into a carpaccio. These longer ones are from Yellow Jacks. You can see the color of them. If you manage to have seen any of my other videos, you can also see the difference in the meat texture and the color for all these fish. But I wanted to do long ones for the Yellow Jack because I really wanted to end up making a nice intricate nigiri with the seaweed wrapped around it. So I was doing a side cut for this just because it was only about a 12 to 13 inch jack. So just like with kombujime, if you go too far, it gets too salty, but what I'm really talking about here is that it also gets too chewy, like gelatinous. Now, what I end up finding out later here is that the Yellow Jack, personally, I like fresh better than dry aged. And a lot of this has to do with the tenderness of the fish. So personally, already off the bat, you can eat yellow jack as sashimi. Once you dry age it, it kind of got a bit chewier than usual. It's not, kind of like hamachi, how it's very soft to chew through and very flavorful. That's what I like in my yellow jacks. This went a bit too far, so if I were to dry age yellow jack, I would actually only do about 3 to 4 days, not a full week. But even then, I would probably do that with large ones because they might have more oil in their skin and more fat, especially around winter time, which could lead to much better flavor, which is what I noticed for the snapper and the grouper, that any of the fat that they had in their system actually improved the flavor rather than like with the yellow jack, which was a very lean meat. So it didn't really have an increase in flavor. I'd be honest with you, it still tasted good, but personally, I would always eat my yellow jack fresh now, and I would dry age any stuff I would like to make into sushi later on. If let's say I shot 5 snapper, I'd probably cook up 2 off the bat and dry age 2, and then keep 1 for whatever it is I want, like tacos or something, or something else. Now, I hope in the comments you guys can ask any questions. We can talk about all this. Maybe you have a different way of doing this. Later on, I do end up interviewing several of my friends who do the same thing, and we end up talking about this. But I always like to start conversations and see what other people have seen, what they experience with different types of fish. During winter, summer, many of these times. I know wintertime usually mackerel, they end up taking up a whole bunch of fat, and that would be amazing to dry age. So for some of the scrap parts that didn't make even cuts for the sashimi or the nigiri, I just tossed them in some ponzu. It was a variety of all 3, so I would separate them from left, middle, and right. And just half of them with spring onions, half of them without. So here I am heating up the oil so that I can make chicharron. And chicharron really does taste good, especially with this fish skin. And it's surprising how similar taste to the pork chicharron, which is the normal one. Just want to make sure your oil's hot enough, and there you go. You can add some pepper or stuff like that. Now, if you have the skin fresh, some salt can help you dry it out a bit quicker. Just make sure to wipe it off, and then once again, go ahead and fry it until it reaches to that preferred crispiness. You also really don't need a deep pan of oil, just enough to do one side and then flip it and do the other. I don't have an air fryer, but it would be really interesting to try this in an air fryer and see if it actually does get crispy in the same way. I'm not sure about that, but if I end up getting one of these one day, I will go ahead and try that and let you know. So for everyone watching till this point, in part 1 of these 2 videos, I do have the information about a giveaway. You can check my Instagram as well for another 2 ways of entries. It's free. I'm going to be giving away 3 Gyotaku prints. Just subscribe to my channel. Once we hit 500 subscribers, I am going to do this giveaway. And preferably, I am going to ship for free within the US. Outside of the United States, that can be up to conversation between us. So by wetting my fingertips, I can hold the rice without it completely sticking. And by no means am I good at this. I am constantly trying to learn and perfect this, which is part of the reason why I love spearfishing, is because I can develop my cooking skills little by little for my personal, enjoyment. So you can see I'm getting a little clumsy with the rice here, but practically I'm going to take some of those longer pieces of the fish and I'm going to just put them on top and shape them with my hand. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking the cuts of the yellow jack that were a bit too thin to just be placed over the rice by themselves, and I'm doing between 2 to 3 pieces, kind of stacked side by side on top of each other, and I'm using the seaweed to hold it in. Some of the moisture from the rice and the moisture from my hand helps seal the seaweed to itself, and it does also improve the presentation aspect of it as well. So I do hope that this video, even though it doesn't exactly go into the deep details of how to do dry aging, it at least introduces you to the fact that it actually does taste good. It improves certain fish qualities over other, like grouper and snapper versus yellowjack, even though look how tender that yellowjack is right there. The possibilities are endless. You can test out different fish, different qualities, especially if you go spearfishing. You are not exactly going to be wasting much, and you're not going to have to constantly spend money. You can just use some of the fish that you have extra and go ahead and do this. Take them to your fridge, clean them out, and let them sit in there for 1 to 2 days first, then do another one next time for 3 to 4 days, then go up to a week, and try out the different flavors yourself. Hopefully by the time I release my next video, it'll have all the information you guys need and can help guide you guys along the way.